Hello and welcome. My name's Estelle Mann. One of my many hobbies is cake decorating and sugarcraft, and a few years ago I decided to do the British Sugarcraft Guild's demonstrator training programme. So now in my spare time I travel around the country demonstrating sugarcraft to different groups and community groups and British Sugarcraft groups, etc. Today I'm going to show you a very simple how to cover a cake with sugarcraft. We're going to start off with the very basics. Now you obviously need a cake to start with. So I've baked a cake. I've just used a packet mix. So I'm keeping it really simple. So this is just a packet mix that you can get from your local supermarket. Nothing fancy. And then you'll need some sugar paste. And again, you can get sugar paste nowadays in most supermarkets. Tesco's call it fondant icing. It really isn't fondant icing, it is sugar paste. Then you've got Sainsbury's. Sainsbury's call it white ready to roll. Asda white ready to roll icing, and Dr. Otker's is probably the most expensive one that you'll find in the supermarket. So these range in price from £1.70 up to about £3.30, and they're all exactly the same as far as I'm concerned. So you just need some sugar paste. There's a kilo of sugar paste in here, which should be more than enough to decorate a cake, cover it and do the decorations. Now you can freeze sugar paste as well if you have any left over or you've got spare. And there's lots of other different brands as well. It used to be if I was doing a wedding cake for somebody, then I would actually spend the money out and buy a proprietary brand like Renshaw's or something. But nowadays they're pretty much all the same. So you can use whatever you like and they will cover a cake without any problems. So I've got some sugar paste and I've got some icing sugar in a shaker. But you could literally just sprinkle some of your fingers. Don't need anything expensive. I'm just going to knead it, because whenever you get it out of the packet you must knead it to soften it. Now I know they do sell ready rolled icing as well. I would personally try and avoid that, because the ready rolled stuff is going to crack when you try to cover a cake with it, because it's already ready rolled and you don't know how long it's been rolled up inside that packet for. Okay, so I'm just kneading the icing to make it nice and soft, which doesn't take long when it's nice and warm like it has been today. I'm making the camera shake a little bit though, so you can see that I am putting some effort into it. Okay, I'm going to shape it into a nice round ball because I've got a round cake to cover. And then I'm going to bring the cake in, so bear with me a second while I do that. I'm going to angle the camera down a bit as well so that you can see a bit more what I'm doing on the board here. Okay, hopefully that's all right for you. Okay, so this is the cake that I made. Now I would normally bake a cake in two halves, but because, let me move that there. Because I wanted to actually show you a little trick, I've baked it in one. I've sliced it with a nice sharp knife, but before I've done so I've cut a little V out of the section here. You can see that, there's a little V cut out. I've made mine quite big so that you can see what it is. There we go. And what I'm going to do is take the two halves of the cake apart and use some buttercream to sandwich it together. Now again, I've used shop bought buttercream. I would normally make my own, and my recipe for buttercream is 5 ounces of butter, 7 ounces of caster sugar and a little bit of lemon juice to take the sweetness off. But this is Betty Crocker's ready mixed. I'm just using a nice palette knife there to get it smooth and spreading some in the middle of the cake. Now I'm just taking it up to the edge, not over the edge. And then the reason that we've cut that little V out is so that you can line the V up when you put it back together. And that way, it doesn't matter how crooked you were when you sliced it in half, it will settle nicely and fit back together. And then we want to take the Betty Crocker icing or whatever icing you're using and put some around the sides as well. Now I've got my cake on a cake board, but yours could be on a plate or whatever it is you want to use it to put it on. I'm just going to go around here with my palette knife, smoothing the buttercream on. Now if you find that you're taking off more cake than you're putting buttercream on, what you can do is actually dip your knife in some warm water, and that will stop that from happening, because the warmth of the knife will soften the buttercream and mean that you're not pulling away more cake than you're putting on icing. A bit of icing on the board there, so I'm just going to lift that off with a knife. So once I've done around the sides, I'm just going to run the palette knife all the way around Make sure I've got a nice coating, and then put some on the top. And a tub of buttercream like this is more than enough to cover your cake. You only want a thin layer. And if you don't like buttercream, you could always use chocolate spread, jam, lemon curd, whatever you want to use. It's literally just to make the cake sticky. So you don't want too much on, or else your icing will slide all over the place. So once you've got a nice coating on, smooth it round the sides and across the top. Alright, I'll get rid of that out of the way. We're finished with that now. And I'm just going to tidy up the edge of my cake board. Now, normally I'd be doing this in the kitchen, so I just have a damp cloth to hand. Here I'm just going to use a water wipe just to take any excess off the board, and then wipe my work board over as well, just so that I don't get crumbs in my icing. I use a chocolate cake and more icing, hopefully to make it easier for you to see what I'm doing. Okay, so it's there. Just going to get a towel. There we are. That's all done. And then I'm going to bring my icing back in with my icing sugar and start to roll it out. Okay, I'm just going to use the rolling pin. Now you'll notice that my rolling pin doesn't have any ends or knobbly bits on, because they just get in the way when you're rolling icing out. It's much better to have a completely smooth rolling pin. And you can get wooden ones from most supermarkets, which are just plain. And most hobby shops sell them. This is a clear acrylic one. And lift your icing up on your rolling pin and turn it round. So you're constantly turning it, trying to keep it as circular as you can, ready to cover your cake. Now you want to be able to measure your cake. So I'm going to move it over to one side and bring the cake back in here. I will tilt the camera forward a little bit more so you can see what I'm doing. So I've got my cake here. Bring it down there. Now I've got my rolling pin in my hand, so I'm going to use my rolling pin to measure my cake. So I'm going to up the side, across the top and down the other side. So the icing needs to be about this diameter. So it needs to be a little bit more that way, and it's almost there lengthways. Now if you have a turntable, you could use the turntable. I wasn't using one today because I thought you might not have one at home, but it would have raised the cake up, I'm realising now, for the film. There we go. So again, check the icing is about the size that you want. It's going to go over your cake. Now the thicker your icing is, the easier it's going to be to ice the cake, which is why when you buy cakes in the shops, there's a lot of icing on them, because it's easier to cover the cake if there's a lot of icing. But I don't like to do mine too thick. Use your rolling pin to pick your icing up. Bring your cake back in. And then starting at the one side, lay your icing across your cake and down the other side. And then we're just going to use our hands, smooth it across the top. And again, I'll tilt the camera down so you can see what I'm doing. And I'm just going to cup my hand, make a little cup with it, and push the icing to the cake. Where there's a pleat, I'm going to open the pleat out and again cup it with my hand round. Turn the cake, pull the pleat out and cup it with my hand. It's important that you don't drag the icing down. You're cupping your hand to the cake, and if anything, scooping it up a little bit. Going around the other side. My cake slid across the board, so I'm just going to slide it back. Then you want to take a knife and trim off any excess icing. It doesn't want to be a sharp knife, so I've just got a palette knife here that I'm going to use. It's a crank handled palette knife. Now my advice is not to cut too close to your cake, because the icing will shrink up the sides of the cake as you're smoothing it on. So cut a little bit away, all the way around. Take off the excess and put that to one side to use for decorating the cake. Okay, you can use our hands, more icing sugar, and smooth it round. nice and smooth on top. Well, one thing that I think I forgot to say is that we always ice the bottom of the cake, because this is the bottom that's been in the bottom of the tin, so it's nice and flat rather than the top of the cake. So you turn the cake upside down when you start, and then start softening it to the sides. Now you can buy smoothers like this. Again, mine are acrylic. You can buy plastic ones in the supermarket for about £4, and you can use this if you find that your hands leave finger marks in the sides of the cake. Or you could buy one of these cheap £1 chopping mats from the pound store, cut it up and cut sections round the corners off so it's not sharp, and again you can use that for smoothing around your cake. Just be careful the edges don't dig in, which is why I've cut the corners off this bit to make the cake nice and smooth. Now you can spend ages smoothing the cake, but as I always say to everybody, it depends on how much you're getting paid or how much you love the person you're doing it for. Trim the icing off a bit closer now, take away the excess, tuck it in nice and neatly, turn it round to you, trim it away. It also depends what decoration you're putting on the cake as well. If you're putting a lot of decoration on, there's not much point spending a lot of time smoothing it. It needs to be smooth, but it doesn't need to be perfect if you're going to put a lot of piping or a lot of decoration on the side. So again, I'm just taking off the excess now and tucking it in at the bottom, trimming it right next to the cake and smoothing it round. Turning the cake, so say if you've got a turntable, you could put it on the turntable and use a turntable. Make sure the cake is centered on your board, and I normally use a board 2 to 3 inches larger than the cake that I'm decorating to give me a bit of space for anything around the edge. And then just with your icing sugar again and your hands, just work it till it's nice and smooth around the edges, around the side of the cake. Make sure it's central. Unless it's for a competition, nobody's going to be measuring it, so just do it by eye, roughly, if it's in the centre. Smooth it round and polish it off. Then you can take a damp piece of kitchen paper and just wipe any excess icing sugar off your board. Now pick all your bits of icing up, because you can use those for decoration, or if you want to use it for the next cake that you've got to decorate, you can pop it back in a plastic bag and store it for next time. Don't store it in cling film, because cling film is porous and cling film will actually allow it to breathe, and therefore it will dry and go hard. But if you put it in a plastic bag, it will keep for a long time, or you can actually freeze it. The same with the cake. The cake itself can be frozen. It can be frozen before you decorate it to make it firmer for you to decorate, or you can freeze it now that you've plain iced it, ready to decorate it another day. So I hope you found that interesting, and if you want to have a go or find out more about cake decorating, why not look up your local British Sugarcraft Guild, see if there's one in your area, and pop along and enjoy more demonstrations like this. Thank you for watching, and I'll hopefully see you again soon. Bye bye.